Hey guys, it's me again, and happy spooky month of October. Today, I'm going to be reading and illustrating a creepypasta that I wrote, The Spiders That Killed Lily. Obviously, this story is going to have spiders in it, so if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, or if you have a fear of spiders yourself, watch with caution or feel free to skip this altogether. I once had a friend in a new neighborhood who I still talk to from time to time. She likes cooking, golfing, and filling her house with abstract paintings. She would also get anxious if she was in an area that was too warm, or if she was in a house with low ceilings. Also, my friend has a horrific fear of spiders. Not arachnophobia, mind you, that's the irrational fear of spiders. My friend, who we'll call Brenda, told me that her fear was mild compared to those with the actual disorder. But one of her old childhood friends really did have arachnophobia. This friend, known simply as Lily, was diagnosed with arachnophobia by a doctor, and her fear was so extreme that even seeing a blurry picture of a spider on a small flip phone screen would push her into a full-blown panic attack. Brenda never knew where this fear originated from, but Lily's mom said it was some kind of traumatic event from her childhood and said nothing more. One day, Lily turned up dead. Brenda couldn't say much about it when it first happened, but I could tell it absolutely tore her up. The police kept her story under wraps, but Brenda trusted me enough that she told me all about the day that Lily died, and said that I should spread her story everywhere, so that she would never be forgotten. This is how it happened, in the words of Brenda herself. It was a normal Saturday afternoon. Lily's husband, Mike, was in the garden while she stood inside the house, the screen door blocking the spiders from getting in. I'd always been in charge of filling the cracks in the drywall, as I didn't have the same fear at the time, and afterwards I started my second job there, which was planting flowers in the garden. Mike finished pulling weeds and went back inside to take a break while Lily continued to watch me plant flowers. This was around the time when Lily put on her giant boots and asked me if there were any spiders around outside. This was an amazing step for her, because for at least 3 years she never even dared to set foot outside her house except to see her therapist, so I made sure I was very thorough in my search. Once outside, I continued to search the ground, looking for any rogue bugs, as Lily took very careful, tentative steps down the stairs of the back porch. Once her boots hit the grass, she simply stood there, holding tightly onto my arm, when a large smile spread across her face. I was proud of her. She'd finally taken the first few steps to get over her fear and live a normal life, without having to worry if the tiniest spider was waiting for her outside, even one that isn't dangerous. I took a few small steps away from her, my mouth widening as she didn't reach out to me in fear, and then I went back to planting flowers. Even though Lily was afraid of spiders, she loved honeybees, so she wanted there to be plenty of flowers around for them. It was also the reason she didn't let Mike pull dandelions from her garden. This was when everything, went wrong. When the last of the flowers was planted, I stood up, taking off my gardening gloves as I turned back towards Lily. She was shaking, but otherwise didn't move. I looked towards the place she was staring and felt my stomach lurch. Millions of tiny spiders were quickly radiating out from under the neighbor's fence, who wasn't as diligent about keeping a garden as we were. Lily still made no move to run. "Come here, Lily, move, let's go." She didn't seem to hear me as I begged her to run. "Get out. Leave before the spiders got to her." The spiders were crawling up her boots. I held Lily's upper arm so tight that the skin turned white under the strain. "Lily, please, you have to breathe. Please, don't. Stop. Listen to me." This was the point when Lily let out the most blood-curdling scream I'd ever heard before, and one I've never heard since. It was so loud that it filled my ears with the worst radio static, making it impossible to focus on anything else as Lily turned and clumsily sprinted across the concrete towards the wooden patio. One of her boots flew off as she tripped, blinded by the rounds of baby spiders that covered her arms and legs. They got into the fabric of our clothing. Lily sobbed. I shook the spiders off my head as Lily slid her fingernails up and down her skin until it bled, and I'm still haunted by the sight of mangled, bloody spiders. That was all I remembered before the police arrived. A neighbor had heard the noise and thought someone was being murdered. I swear to God, the fear for my friend overtook any fear of spiders I will ever have, and I remember distinctly as Lily's body thumped to the ground, her eyes going wide and glassy. 8 legs swept over each one, drowning in the tears that still covered her face. It was at that moment when the spiders that were on me found their way into my own eyes, like a mirror reflecting the last thing Lily saw before she stopped seeing altogether. That was the last thing I remember before I woke up in the hospital, my back drenched in a cold sweat. When Brenda finished telling me the story, she burst into tears. I let her cry for a bit, but I remembered to get more details out of her, and even though it adds to the story, I wish I hadn't said anything. Brenda had gotten these details from the police, who only told her because she happened to be a close friend and was on the scene when Lily died. She told me she didn't remember the exact features of the spiders, but she'd been told that these particular spiders weren't native to the United States. They were still harmless, and it was in fact Lily's fear that killed her, but it's still chilling knowing that these spiders came from another country. "It was Mike, that bastard," Brenda told me between her sobs. "He must have imported those spiders just to scare her. He's never been sound of mind. He's awful." Mike wasn't arrested, of course. There wasn't enough evidence to make a conviction, but Brenda insists to this day that Mike was at fault. Some of those spiders infested the entirety of the western United States, and now whenever I see one, I wonder if it's a descendant of one of the spiders that killed Lily. If you ask someone from the area about the spiders that killed Lily, they'll likely change the subject or get angry. Most of them will pretend they don't know what you're talking about. I get chills myself when the subject is mentioned. The mystery of where the spiders came from or why they were there has never been solved. I'll admit, I still can't verify this story, since Brenda is the only one who will tell me about it. But if it is just a story, it's a damn good one, and I can't find a way to justify it being fake after Brenda became a nervous wreck right in front of me. And that's why, to this day, my friend has a horrific fear of spiders.